Hello, everyone. So I'm here to talk about the Belt and Road Initiative being instituted by China. It's a huge infrastructure project where they're getting their grips all over the planet. What they're doing is they're building new trade routes on land and sea. The initiative is building infrastructure in Asia, Europe, and East Africa. They're building roads, railways, pipelines, power plants, ports, and airports. And they're expected to spend at least $1.3 trillion through the year 2027. And as of now, there are now more than 70 countries involved. Chinese companies last year, and these are state-owned Chinese companies, invested over $15 billion last year, according to Beijing, and the rest of the money above that was invested comes from the countries where the projects are built. And these countries are mostly poor and cannot afford the investments, so they take out loans from China and that they can't repay. So one of the examples of what happens when they can't repay a loan happened in 2017. China built a port here in Sri Lanka, and when Sri Lanka couldn't repay, then Sri Lanka was forced to give China a 99-year lease on that port. So basically it's China's port for the next century. Kenya, right here in Central Africa, same thing happened to them. They can't repay, so now China is going to get a 40-year lease on that port. Italy, President Xi Jinping of China recently went to Italy and met with the Italian government, and Italy is the first G7 country to sign up with China, and they signed 29 deals worth almost $3 billion. This is to work together to develop Italy's transport, logistics, and port infrastructure, and strengthen financial cooperation and expand two-way and unimpeded trade and investment. Critics say that this is a way for China to spread its geopolitical influence. Also, it gives Chinese companies access to more markets and economies, while at the same time it owns it. At the same time, China's own markets are pretty much still closed to foreign investment. So again, they'll force these countries to partner with their companies, but then China itself doesn't allow foreign investment into their country. So it's kind of a double standard. A gentleman by the name of Rory Green, a Chinese and North Asian economist, said the deal Italy signed was fantastic for President Xi. And it's a really big coup for Xi Jinping, and it will give him a foothold in the heart of Europe. Many say this will create a rift between Italy and the rest of Europe. This undermines Europe's attempt to withstand or compete with China's economic might. French President Macron recently said they need to stand up to this new superpower, and Italy, France's neighbor, just kind of undermined that. Since late 2013, Beijing has invested almost $700 billion into more than 60 countries for large infrastructure projects and loans to government. China doesn't require its partners to meet strict conditions on corruption, human rights, or financial sustainability, and this has opened the door to widespread corruption. One example of the corruption was in Malaysia. Current Prime Minister of Malaysia is Mahathir Mohamad, and he has so far canceled a $20 billion railroad project, and he also canceled a $2.3 billion natural gas pipeline. These were implemented by his predecessor, former Prime Minister Najib Razak, who is now currently on trial for corruption, including stealing over $700 million from his own government. Yep, that's right. Former Prime Minister Razak was stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from his own government while he was having his government take out loans from China to build these infrastructure projects. Pretty sick when you're ripping off your own country. China is to fund the infrastructure projects. At the same, okay, so moving on to Pakistan. Pakistan has borrowed over $62 billion from China to finance highway and rail infrastructure as well as a port in Gwadar. For those of you who don't know, Pakistan, that port is right here, right there northwest of India. And China, the Pakistani government has already received multiple bailouts from Chinese banks, and now Pakistan is talking to the International Monetary Fund for a bailout because they're just drowning. If they don't get that bailout, then China's gonna own them. The Maldives, a little island nation down here in the Indian Ocean, their former president Abdullah Yameen borrowed a lot of money from China, and now many are concerned China is going to basically take over that country, which is in a strategic shipping location. Zambia, right here. Zambia scholar Trevor Simumba has said Zambia's borrowing from China was rapidly becoming unsustainable. He also mentioned the severe lack of transparency over many of the key terms of the loans. Uganda, right here in Central Africa, Uganda borrowed from China to pay Chinese companies to build a highway, and it can't repay the debts. Also, countries are frustrated with China's insistence on single bid contracts, which force the countries to partner with Chinese companies and to pay above market prices for the projects. And there are sovereign concerns which puts all the risk of these projects are on the countries instead of the Chinese companies. So it's a win-win situation for China. Now a total of 50 Chinese state-owned companies are implementing 1,700 infrastructure projects around the world worth over $900 billion. The Belt and Road Initiative increases Beijing's control of critical supply chains and its ability to redirect the flow of international trade. There are 5 ports in Djibouti, which is a very strategic shipping lane where a good portion of the world's oil flows through. They are right across from Yemen. That port was taken over by China. Another port in southwestern Africa, Namibia, that was taken over by China. The one that I already mentioned in Pakistan, that was taken over by China, along with the one in Sri Lanka, and then one in Greece. There's already a port in Greece that has been taken over by China. Those 5 countries, after their ports got taken over by China, then China was able to strengthen their military ties with those countries. So not only did they take over the ports, but they strengthened their military presence in those countries. China also owns stakes in 40 other ports in Africa, Asia, and Europe, and they have plans to buy majority stakes in 9 more ports. And finally, in 2010, only 20% of the world's deep water ports had any Chinese investment, but this year it's up to 66%. In just 9 years it went from 20% to 66%. So this is just another sign that the 21st century is going to belong to China. So anyways, that's it for now.